Common Sense Army, it is Wednesday, and on today's episode of the Why I'm Right podcast, the jury is out in the Trump case. We're waiting for a verdict. It could be breaking news at any point in time. We're also breaking down how the Democrats seem very nervous right now. We're talking about what happened yesterday in front of the courthouse and yesterday at the White House. And speaking of the White House, it looks like Joe Biden's not done with his political prosecutions and getting involved in the criminal justice system. He now is entangled in another trial regarding other people. You don't want to miss this. This is the Why I'm Right podcast.
We live in a world filled with noise and confusion, clickbait, and outright lies in the media. But here, we cut through the clutter to find the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. This is Why I'm Right, the podcast where we dig deeper, ask the tough questions, and unravel the tangled webs of political and current events. Join us as we dissect the latest news, analyze political rhetoric, and challenge the narratives that dominate the mainstream discourse. We're not shy. From dissecting the motives behind policy decisions to uncovering the hidden agendas of public figures, it's what we do. It's time to think for ourselves. This is Why I'm Right. And now your unafraid and unapologetic host, Matt Taylor.
He is right. This is the Why I'm Right podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome to the show. If you're already a member of the Common Sense Army, welcome back. I hope everyone had a great long weekend, enjoyed Memorial Day, and again, remember why we celebrate Memorial Day: to honor those who have honored us and served and committed the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. And before I start, I say this on every podcast. We're growing the Common Sense Army one day at a time, one podcast at a time. The one way you can help in our mission is by clicking subscribe, sharing these videos with your friends, your family, people who agree and disagree, because the most important thing in our country right now is our ability to have civil discourse and talk about these key issues. We come at it from a different angle, a common sense approach, in order to kind of ask the questions many are afraid to ask and dive deeper into many of the issues that maybe you don't hear about on the mainstream media. Let's talk about today's podcast. And again, if you haven't been following closely, I don't know where you're living, because right now you turn on any news channel, any network, and they're talking about the Trump trial. If you aren't aware, Donald Trump is on trial in New York City, a sham trial, a business records trial, a trial that I've broken down pretty extensively on this podcast, so I won't go into the nuts and bolts on this one. But what I can tell you is the jury is deliberating in this case. And the one element of this whole thing that still is mind-blowing to me, I still can't seem to figure it out. Maybe I'm stupid, but many people can't figure this out, is we've gone through closing arguments. The prosecution has rested. The defense has rested. Closing arguments. The entire case. All the witnesses were called, and yet no crime has still been articulated. No one's been able to articulate what the underlying crime is that makes this case a felony. And I've talked about it here on this podcast. The crime that Donald Trump potentially committed is a business records, falsifying business records, and that is a misdemeanor in New York City. The reason they've been able to even have this trial, call it a felony case, and charge Donald Trump with a felony is because the prosecution is arguing that Donald Trump committed the misdemeanor of falsifying business records in order to cover up another crime. Well, that other crime is incredibly important for a variety of reasons. That's how they were able to elevate this to a felony charge, but it's also how they were able to get around the statute of limitation. This case goes back, they're talking about 2016, after Trump was already in office. But 2016, this case wouldn't have been able to be brought because of the statute of limitation. The only way we were able to have this trial and have this felony case and even bring up the misdemeanor charge of falsifying business records was because the prosecution said this is a felony because Donald Trump committed the misdemeanor of falsifying the business records in order to cover up another crime. Well, you would think if that was their argument and that was their, the ability for them to even bring this case, we would at least know what the crime is. And this is a twofold issue. The first issue is forget trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that all elements of a crime are committed. They still haven't even articulated what the crime he committed was. That's fold one. Fold two of this is the judge just ruled in the jury instructions and instructed the jury that the jury doesn't even have to agree on what that crime is. So forget being innocent until proven guilty. Forget having to prove all elements of a crime. Forget having to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that all elements of a crime were committed. The judge is actually telling the jury in the jury instructions, you guys don't have to agree on what the crime was as long as you agree that some crime was committed. This case would never be brought against any other person unless your name is Donald J. Trump. That's really the reality of it. Even people on the left at this point understand this is a political prosecution. And whether you understand the intricacies of what's going on in this courtroom, you can start really understanding when you look at CNN, you look at MSNBC, you look at these Democrat stronghold media outlets, people who have pushed the Democrat agenda for years and years and years, when they're even talking about the fact that the star witness in this case, Michael Cohen, is a complete liar, lied under oath, lied on the stand in this trial. But B, that if you're going to charge Trump with a felony, you should have to at least say what the felony is. And in fact, the jury should have to agree on what that felony is. This case is the perfect case because if they convict Donald Trump, first off, it'll backfire completely on the Democrats. We're going to dive into that next. It's already showing that it has backfired completely on the Democrats. They've completely changed their whole strategy on how they're going to deal with this case. But beyond that, you start really thinking about the fact that in this case, no crime has been articulated. Michael Cohen, a liar, a perjurer, was a disaster on the case. This is the perfect case for the Supreme Court or frankly any kind of appeal to overturn. I have zero doubts that if Donald Trump is convicted of a felony and is sentenced to any kind of jail time or any kind of punishments or anything, this case will be overturned on appeal or the Supreme Court will rule because there is so much wrong with not only the facts of the case, not only the witnesses in the case, but beyond all of that, even the premise, the legal premise of what we're seeing the judge instruct the jury to do, they don't even have to agree on what the underlying crime is. It showcases to you, to me, to everyone out there in the public eye, this is political prosecution at its finest. And we have no idea what the jury is going to do. It could happen while I'm on the podcast right now. We could see breaking news. The jury has come to a verdict. We have no idea how long it's going to be. But when you look at the jury and trying to, everyone's been trying and talking about it on mainstream media, you try to start trying to figure out what the jury's opinions are, how the jury's going to come out. Everyone's telling you their opinion. It's very unpredictable and very hard to read a jury. What we do know about the jury is there are two lawyers that are on the jury. And whether they're extreme leftist, Democrat, Biden supporter, an Obama supporter, whatever it is, even in this Democrat-run state with a Democrat judge, with a Democrat jury, there are two lawyers on this jury. And beyond what they think about Donald Trump, they have to understand the legal precedent. They have to understand what the judge is doing, first off, but the legal precedent that is being set by this case is the constitutional precedent that we're setting in this case right now. And that doesn't even talk about the political precedent we're setting about going after an opponent and charging him on crimes from years and years ago and not having to define what the crime is and then having the judge say, hey, you guys don't even have to agree with what the crime is. As long as you think he committed some sort of crime, you could charge and we're going to convict. If you don't see it at this point, you're never going to see it, which is fine. But that just shows you, again, you are so political because the facts are right there. The facts are right here for all of us. And Democrats are starting to realize this. Democrats are starting to see the polls. You start seeing on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Trump is only increasing the polls. Minority communities are going out for Trump right now. Trump is 3 times the African-American support that he had in the last election right now. That could be a variety of things. First off, Joe Biden as a president has been absolutely, abysmal, to say the least. Our economy's trash right now. Inflation is trash right now. Our border is trash right now. People are fed up with the Democrat Party and people are fed up with Joe Biden. But I believe this whole trial in New York City, charging him across the country. Again, Donald Trump's 77 years old. And he's gone 77 years of life where he hadn't been convicted of anything in his entire life. And all of a sudden, he runs for office a second time. And what happens? He gets charged with 91 felonies right now. And again, if you can't see, that is political. In an election year, you're charging someone who lived 77 years without being convicted of any kind of crime, and he runs for office against the party in power, and you charge him with 91 felonies, and you start seeing the facts of the case aren't lining up, the witnesses in the case are trash, and the judge in the case is clearly impartial, it leads to the demise of the Democrat Party. And Democrats are really nervous right now. They're starting to see it. The reason you know this is because they're realizing the lawfare in this country has backfired completely. And if you don't believe me, just think about this for a second. Alvin Bragg, the DA in New York City, in Manhattan, showed up in the courtroom yesterday. During the closing statements, during the closing arguments, Alvin Bragg was in the courtroom. At the same time, Joe Biden announced from the White House that when a verdict comes in, he's going to issue a statement directly from the White House and do a press conference about the verdict in the case in New York City. And at the same time, Robert De Niro, of all people, yesterday goes out and holds a rally in front of the courthouse on behalf of the Biden-Harris campaign. He told you this is on behalf of the Biden-Harris campaign with the January 6th Capitol Police. 2 of them were there yesterday, and they held a rally outside the courthouse. So what happened to, we're going to let the criminal justice system play out. We're going to let everything play out. We're going to let, stay away from this case. We aren't going to have anything political about this case. But they showed their hand completely yesterday. When you have the DA show up in the courtroom, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, make a statement from the White House, and you have, I guess, some, at this point, B-list, C-list celebrity go out, Robert De Niro, say he's joining the Biden-Harris campaign and hold a rally with the January 6th Capitol Police in front of the courthouse yesterday alone, you start seeing how much of a political prosecution this case has been. And now really the meat of this episode, because like I said, I want you guys to get the full picture, right? We're starting to see the corruption in real time. We're starting to see the political prosecution in real time. And we're starting to see the Democrats get nervous and say, hold on, our strategy hasn't worked. Charging Trump hasn't worked. Going after Trump hasn't worked. Convicting Trump in New York City in the E. Jean Carroll case didn't work. None of it has worked. So they're trying at the last minute here to go from we're going to stay out of it completely to we're going to show up at the courthouse. We're going to send out Robert De Niro and hold a rally in front of the courthouse. And Joe Biden's going to speak from the White House when a verdict comes in this case. That's not the only thing Joe Biden has been doing recently. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is the real meat on the bones on this episode. And the reason I'm even having this podcast, I want you to understand the whole picture so you can see the corruption for yourself. But what I want you to think about, if none of this was enough for you to say Joe Biden is corrupt, the Biden administration is corrupt, the Biden administration is overstepping their boundaries and getting themselves involved in political prosecution and getting involved in the criminal justice system, if that wasn't enough from the evidence I just showed you? Well, I hope this is. Because if you weren't aware, Hunter Biden is set his trial. He has a trial coming up for gun crimes, having an illegal firearm due to his drug use and everything else. He wasn't allowed to be holding a gun, having a gun, owning a gun. He has gun charges, and he's going on trials. The trial is set to begin on June 3rd. That's just a few days away. Sounds interesting, but not crazy, some would say. But what if I told you that President Joe Biden visited in the wee hours of the night? President Joe Biden had the Secret Service bring him in the wee hours of the night to visit Haley Biden just days before the trial is set to begin. If you don't know who Haley Biden is, again, I'm going to try to paint the picture as best as I can. Haley Biden was Beau Biden, Joe Biden's son, Beau Biden's wife. Once Beau Biden died, Haley Biden started dating Beau Biden, Joe Biden's son, Beau Biden's brother, Hunter Biden. And during her relationship with Hunter Biden, again, it's a cluster. Pardon my French. It's craziness. But again, Haley Biden, during her relationship with Hunter Biden, was there and witnessed the crime of Hunter Biden having an illegal firearm, and she was involved in the disposal of that weapon. She is the star witness in the case against Hunter Biden. So while all this Trump stuff's going on and everyone is saying this is a political prosecution, now Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to get myself involved in another case that means something to me. Again, Joe Biden's a selfish person. If you don't see that, I don't know what you're looking at. Joe Biden, in the wee hours of the night, visited Haley Biden days before the trial, where Haley Biden is set to be the star witness in the case for the prosecution against Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. So break this down with me for a second. So if the President of the United States visits the star witness of the prosecution, who is set to testify against the president's son, Hunter Biden, for the gun charges that she witnessed during her relationship with the defendant in the case, this is witness tampering at its finest. This is witness tampering. There's no way around it. The president is using his power, his office, to influence a star witness in the case against his son. And the White House is trying to cover it up, saying, Beau Biden's death was 9 years ago next week, and he visited in the wee hours of the night to just celebrate and honor Beau Biden. Maybe true, but the optics don't seem that way. Why would you visit Haley Biden days before the trial against your son, Hunter Biden, where Haley Biden is the star witness in the case for the prosecution, and she's set to testify against Hunter Biden? And we've all known it. We all know that Hunter Biden did Joe Biden's dirty work for a long time with Burisma, with getting kickbacks, with all of the things. We all know that Hunter Biden did Joe Biden's dirty work for a long time. Well, it now looks like Joe is returning the favor. Joe is now starting to do the dirty work for Hunter Biden and cover up his crimes once again, using the office of the presidency, the power of the presidency, to impact a case that impacts your son. And I can respect it, to be honest with you. As a father, I understand wanting to do it. I understand wanting to protect your son, protect your family. I get it. But to do it the way he did in the wee hours of the night, have Secret Service drive you over to go visit the star witness in the case against your son, again, is so in your face to you, to me, to every American in this nation. And if you can't see it for what it is, you aren't even willing to open your eyes. It's right in front of your face. And they could try to cover this up however they want. It's right in front of your face. Occam's razor. the most simple, the easiest solution is probably the right solution. The most simple solution probably is the most right solution. And you start breaking it down. Trump lived for 77 years, didn't get convicted of a felony. He runs for office against Joe Biden. Joe Biden sends the third highest, person in the Department of Justice from the Biden administration to New York City, directs the Department of Justice and his attorney general to go after Donald Trump using the courts. We see a raid on Mar-a-Lago where they had the authority to shoot to kill. They had the authority to go on to Mar-a-Lago's property and engage with Trump, engage with the Secret Service. They charged Trump in Florida. They charged Trump in Georgia. They charged Trump in New York City. 91 felonies across the country. And they've all started to backfire slowly. And Democrats have no idea what to do anymore. But if you can't see it for yourself, and you can't see it's a problem, at minimum, you could say it's a problem. Even if you're the most left-wing person in the world, you could say it's a problem when the President of the United States visits the star witness in the case against his son days before the trial is set to begin, and that person he's visiting is said to be the star witness in the case and testify against his son. If you can't say that's problematic, again, you're politically blinded, meaning you are so politically motivated that you are blinded to the truth. And it's time for America to stand up again. America needs to be the land of the free, the land where there's a separation between church and state. There's a separation. There's a balance of power in this country. There's a balance of power. That's why the Supreme Court has certain powers that the president doesn't. That's why the president has some powers that Congress doesn't. That's why there's a House and a Senate. That's why we have our system. There's supposed to be a balance of powers. Our founding fathers set it up this way, so there's a balance of power. There is due process. But when the judge in the case against your political opponents, who you charged with 91 felonies, when the judge in that case is saying the jury doesn't even have to agree on what the crime was, that's not due process. When the president goes and visits the star witness in the case against his son days before the trial begins in the wee hours of the night, that's not due process. That's called political prosecution, and that's called political manipulation, and it is unjust. It is unfair, and it's un-American. And so again, until we can call it out for what it is, we're never going to be able to get beyond it. And that's why I truly believe, people in this nation are starting to use their common sense. And social media has opened the game. Social media has changed the game completely. People are now able to listen to podcasts. People are now able to see a different form of media on social media. People are starting to see stories that maybe the media would cover up for years and start seeing it for what it is. And so as we move forward on the Why I'm Right podcast, again, when the breaking news come out and a verdict is in, we're going to hop on here and I'm going to do a podcast again talking about the implications. I'm going to stay tuned and make sure I'm following this case to a T, and I'll give you all the tea. I'll give you all the scoop, and we'll break it down. I'm hopeful that the two lawyers on the jury will understand the weight of a verdict, the weight of a conviction. Not the weight just on the political process, but the weight from a constitutional standpoint, the weight from a precedent standpoint, the weight from a legal standpoint. And I'm hopeful that America is still better than it looks. America is still the land of the free and the home of the brave, even in a city, even in a courtroom that is so politically motivated. A judge that's so politically motivated, a president that's so politically motivated, a DOJ that's so politically motivated, America is still great. And so as we move forward on the Why I'm Right podcast, we'll be back. As soon as a verdict is in, you'll hear from me. So as always, this has been the Why I'm Right podcast, and I just told you why I'm right.
You've been listening to Why I'm Right. Thanks for being a part of the Common Sense Army. Our passion is to cut through the noise and confusion and to bring light to clickbait and outright lies in the media. Unafraid, unapologetic, real and raw. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at Why I'm Right, on X at Why I'm Right Pod. And for more, hit the website at www.whyimrightpodcast.com. See you next time.